The Evil Dead is a 1981 horror film starring the one and only Bruce Campbell and is directed by one of my biggest inspirations of all time, Sam Raimi. Five friends travel to a cabin and unknowingly release an evil demonic force in the woods. The Evil Dead actually started the whole cabin in the woods cliche that we see all the time in horror movies now. I mean, it's almost like its own subgenre in horror at this point. Now, the story of this movie may seem simple to most people, and it is, but the execution is anything but that. Sam Raimi has such a kinetic, recognizable style for his directing here that has carried over throughout his career, and it's just something I love to see. I love to see the evolution of where he was and where he came from and what he is now. Sam Raimi holds a special place in my heart. He's truly a legend, and I have watched countless making of documentary videos about the Evil Dead trilogy and just, behind the scenes of Sam Raimi and talking about filmmaking and his journey in general. Needless to say, I don't keep coming back to The Evil Dead for its story or its characters. Honestly, if I had to pick a negative about the movie, it would be the characters are just not strong at all. Even Ash, played by the legendary Bruce Campbell, he is just, an icon in his own right. But in this movie, he's actually not even the Ash that we all know and love. He doesn't turn to Ash, really, until Evil Dead 2, Dead by Dawn. But in this one, he's more cowardly, he's just not who we know, and the rest of the characters are just kind of throwaway. The characters almost kind of remind me of the slasher blueprint that we see in all those horror movies. Slasher movies just have the characters that you just want to see get picked off one by one, and that's kind of the same with these characters here. What you do come for is the amazing gore and makeup effects that you have on display, as well as the iconic camera work that we have from Sam Raimi and his DP, Tim Fillo. They actually came up with this kind of POV for the evil entity that's out in the woods, that's lurking and following all of them. It's almost something that we see in a lot of slashers and a lot of horror movies now, so it's something that kind of revolutionized filmmaking and cinema in general. But it was kind of a technique that was coined as shaky cam that actually was utilized in other genres, even like action genres specifically. We see it in like the Bourne trilogy. It's something that derived out of the Evil Dead. This first film is just kind of like a more serious version of what we get in Evil Dead 2. Evil Dead 2 is more of a remake of this original film, but it's done better, I have to say. It has more comedic elements in it, whereas this original Evil Dead film is just a straight up horror movie, and its just whole goal is just to scare you and be unnerving. The makeup, like I said, is top notch here, and the gore, it's insane. It's not quite the amount of blood that we'd see in modern horror films, but it feels like every Evil Dead movie since this one has tried to top one after the next. I remember Evil Dead Rise, that came out like a couple of years ago. I think they said they used an insane amount of gallons of blood in that movie. There's qualities about this film that I've heard a lot of people say is just cheap looking. It looks very low budget, and I will say it's true. It has this very square, grainy look to it that makes it feel like almost like a Super 8 film. But that's kind of the charm that I get out of it, especially as an aspiring filmmaker myself. This is a first-time director on display for sure, and to some, that could be seen as a negative or a criticism of the film, but I see it as a huge inspiration because look at what he did. Look at what he accomplished in a whole hour and 20 minutes. That most people won't even accomplish in their lifetime. Not a whole lot of people will just go out in the middle of the woods and shoot a horror movie with their buddies from Detroit, it just doesn't happen. So the fact that Sam Raimi did that with his buddies, Robert Tappert and Bruce Campbell and his brother Ted, it's just really cool to me. you know, and they weren't from Hollywood. They just went out and made a movie. And that's why I think the more cheaper qualities I kind of overlook, and the lower budget doesn't really bother me as much because it comes off as more effective. I will say upon the rewatch for this that the sound design is great in this movie. I had never really noticed that before, but even when he's opening at like the cellar door, or he's like putting on these locks or putting on chains to tie someone down, it sounds really good. It's super crisp, which, you know, kind of helps take away from the cheaper aspects of the visuals of the film. By bringing up the sound, you make everything else technically look better about the filmmaking. The Evil Dead is iconic in the horror genre. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. You won't regret it. It's a very quick hour and 20 minutes. I'm going to give the movie 3.5 out of 5 stars. The only negatives, like I said, are the characters. They're just not very strong in the movie, but, you know, you don't really go for that, like I said. Go for the amazing gore, makeup, sound design, filmmaking aspects that still are effective. Maybe they're a little low budget and cheap, but it's still iconic nonetheless. Thank you guys for watching the video, and I'll see you guys in the next episode of 31 Days of Horror.